I have spent many happy hours with family members and children at the Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center on the west side of Chattanooga. I've rented canoes there and enjoyed tours and walking the trails there. The Reflection Riding Arboretum has a new president. His name is Mark McKnight. He's been on the job about a month. He's 36 years old, lives with a partner on South Side, and has a long history in promoting venues that are sports and health related. He was involved in Rock Creek Outfitters, the retailer, with a strong online presence for 12 years. And then most recently in Roots Rated, which is a web platform that helps people find online where they would like to go for their walking, their outdoor jaunts, their vacation trips all around the country. And that's called Roots Rated. But Mark had kind of a change of ideas when he was approached by people from Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center. Mark, you're now in the nonprofit sector. Reflection Riding is a 501c3 charity. Mm-hmm. What was the pitch made to you to come over as the president of this organization?
Great question, David. So as you mentioned, I've been involved in the outdoors. I've loved the outdoors for a long time. But even at Rock Creek, back when I started my career in the outdoors, it was all about getting people outside and helping them fall in love with the mental benefits, the physical benefits, and all the things that you get to experience in the outdoors. And so now I just get to do that full time. And that ultimately was what the convincing argument was. Hey, why don't you come to us, check out this? This is a hidden gem. And I knew this. I mean, I've paddled on Lookout Creek. I've run the trails up there, and I've used the property to get out to Skyuka Springs, beautiful place that's actually on National Park land. But I've used this property, and like you said, I've been out there with my family. I've taken my mother out there, and we actually got to see it when there was water all the way up to the road because it was flooded so much. So you get to see the dynamics of nature and the change through all the seasons at Reflection Riding. And so the conversation began with, hey, will you just come hear what we have, hear what the opportunity is, speak with the board, come meet the staff and see what you think. And at the time, I was consulting at the time.
You were consulting with Reflection Riding?
No, just with different clients on marketing. So I was kind of, bringing in different voices, hearing different things. And so I said, yeah, I'll take a look. And told Dawson Wheeler, who actually is one of the co-founders at Rock Creek, he's on the board there. And so he was the one that actually made the call and asked me to come in. And I said, yeah, okay, well, I mean, at the very least, I could do some consulting work and help you guys kind of move this ahead, but I'll take a look at the job. And when I did come in, I met the board, talked about what they were interested in doing and how they were looking for a change. It ended up being a great fit for me.
In your interview with the board of Reflection Riding, did you offer some criticisms or some discussion about what they were doing that sort of implied that they really were short? They hadn't seen things that to you in marketing were really obvious.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of what got me. Number one, I came into it with a really interesting position, which was, I don't need this job. Two, that gave me, they wanted me to be honest. And I did. I went in, actually mystery shopped it. I went in and signed up as if I didn't know anything about it. Went in and walked around and thought about it as if I had never been there before. And I brought a lot of those results of that analysis back to them. And some of that was just the engagement with the outdoor community. We are now nearly $1 trillion industry. The outdoor industry is, I'd have to look it up, but I think it's 887 billion in the last report that came out. And those are numbers that, because of the passage of the Outdoor Rec Act last year, we're going to actually have those numbers as part of the official GDP estimates that come from the Commerce Department.
Well, say something about that law. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. Basically, what the outdoor industry, ever since I've been in it, we have been making this argument that there is a very strong economic impact of this industry. And however, a lot of people think that we're hippies in the woods and we're just out there. We're not taking up hotel room nights. We're kind of off the radar for a lot of the different ways that you measure economic impact. And so our industry several years ago actually went out and hired one of these firms that does this and quantified the value of this industry on an annual basis. The original number that came out, I think it was about 5 years ago, was 600 something billion, and this past one that came out was 887. So that is, there's still a problem there when you go to Congress and you say, hey, we're this big industry, you should pay attention to us. We're actually bigger than oil and gas. We actually provide more jobs than auto manufacturing in the state of Tennessee. You say things like that, and they say, okay, well, where does that come from? And you say, well, here's this report. Well, that's from our industry association. So there's still a gap there. So it was really important for our industry to have the official Commerce Department estimate. And so a couple years ago, an effort began to add outdoor industry specifically to the GDP. And it's Congress.
You mean that data was not included before in the
estimates? Not included. So we're a massive industry that's going completely off the radar from a GDP perspective. But Congress, looked at the data that we had, and they listened to our argument. And they said, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." And this bill actually passed with unanimous consent in an election year. So, it's kind of rare bit of good news and bipartisanship, and that's the way the outdoor industry almost always is. Well,
you think generally, though, Mark McKnight, it'd be better not to be noticed by Congress and the federal government, just to not have them there come to you to try to help you.
Well, they always have their hand out too when that happens, but but it does make a big difference when I go to Congress and I say, hey, we need to protect land. We already own this land collectively. We need to protect it and not sell it off to oil and gas companies. I can make that argument now and have an economic aspect to it.
Now, you are also a writer of a sort, Mark McKnight. You have a post on the blog of reflection writing, and you make a kind of a bold assertion about how if people just were more connected with healthful places and healthful entities such as reflection writing, Arboretum, and Nature Center, that there would be an easing, perhaps over time, of the need for sick care and medical care. Can you develop that point, please?
Sure. So I start that article off talking about my mother, and we all learn so much from our mothers if we were lucky enough to spend time with them. And my mom was in healthcare. As long as I can remember, she was in the healthcare industry. But she always said, "I'm not doing healthcare. I'm doing sick care. We don't do healthcare." She talked about preventative medicine. She talked about having a healthy lifestyle. She talked a lot about diet before diet was a big thing that, now everybody's talking about diet. There's 100 different special diets, but she really felt like the way that we live our lives kind of leads to the outcomes that we have for our health. And so that was ingrained in me, and I always thought that was true, but the research hadn't caught up, and the research still hasn't caught up in terms of outdoors. Obviously, physical activity is something that your doctor is going to tell you. I mean, any problem that you have, almost, the doctor is going to say, well, you need to eat better. You need to exercise a certain amount every day. But the healthcare industry hasn't come up with many good ways to make that happen, other than discounts for a gym. I mean, your Blue Cross or whoever gives you 10% off a gym membership. Well, you know what? That's not going to work. It hasn't worked. In fact, if I had to go to a gym to be healthy, it wouldn't work for me, because I can't stand going to the gym. But I love being outside, and I love being outside in a very relaxed. I'm not talking about that you have to be some kind of hardcore, like you're an ultra runner. I mean, I've done that kind of stuff and it's fun, but I'm talking about going out and going for a walk. Reflection riding has a couple mile loop. It's what gave it its name, the riding. Behind that was that you would drive your car through, and you'd see a couple different sites, and it's pretty interesting. What we're trying to get people to do is go walk it, go ride your bike around that loop.
But people still do drive their cars through, right? That's still,
you can still
pay to go through by car.
Yeah, you can do that. Of our members and a lot of the people that enjoy it the most actually park in the parking lot. There's actually a member parking lot. You can come in even when we're closed. And a lot of those people go in and they just walk the loop, and you'll see a wide variety of people doing that.
And how long does it take to walk that loop?
Oh, I mean, you can go, there are a couple different ways you can do it, but I would say a good walk, and not taking a ton of not going super fast, but an hour or so is a good amount of time to spend out there.
And that's what people do on Sunday or Saturday afternoon. They come with their family or their wives or husbands and just traipse along the path.
Absolutely. And you see a lot of people that go there every single day. I mean, now that I've been there for a month, I've seen There's one couple in particular that parks in the gate. They park outside the gate because they know they're going to be there longer than we're going to be open. But they go spend at least an hour and a half or so. And I think they walk into the national park too, because they're there for a long time.
This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Mark McKnight. He is the new president at Reflection Riding Arboretum and Nature Center, has been on the job for a month, and is bringing a new perspective on the use of the internet to bring more people there. About 10,000 a year, children a year come through the park, many families. And Mark, let me ask about that. Where will the Reflection Riding Arboretum and the Nature Center do more to bring people in, and what are you going to bring in that direction?
Sure. Mark? One of the things that I've been talking with one of our board members, Stephanie Crow, who's really fantastic and energetic person to have on the board with us. I think I know she's been on Cindy's show. I don't know if she's been on your show, but I've been talking to her about this idea of becoming the Edney of the outdoors, and that's not a phrase I can use with a lot of people, but assuming that you've followed what's going on with the startup culture and the startup scene in Chattanooga, the Edney is a building that was completely underutilized and was recently purchased, remodeled. They've done a beautiful job with it. They actually painted the outside in this really bold graphic. And it's very cool, but it's privately owned, but they've opened it up for people to come and meet. They relocated CoLab there. So CoLab is an incubator kind of helping all these startups get started. And they have programmed it so that there are really interesting things happening all day long, every day in that building. And I would like for that same kind of approach to be feasible at Reflection Riding. We're really a place that it's a place of intersection, a place that you can come, run into other people who are doing interesting things in the outdoors, and bump into each other and share ideas. I'd like to bring in, we've had some great speakers in the past come out before I was there, but I'd like to bring in people like Richard Louv, I mentioned in the article that I wrote. I got to interview him, and it was quite a pleasure to hear directly from him. He's the guy he's a best-selling author, wrote Last Child in the Woods, and kind of started to ring the alarm bell about us not spending enough time in nature. He coined the term nature deficit disorder, which I think is hugely powerful and has been picked up by a lot of people. I'd like to bring Florence Williams, who wrote The Nature Fix, in here. I'd like to really kind of get that conversation going. And I mentioned that this research, the academic side of what happens to us when we're in nature has not caught up to what people are actually experiencing. But the research is happening. Really, South Korea and Japan are the two countries that are leading this discussion, and they have seen quite a bit. Those are, if you think about the cultures there, they're packed in really tight. They have dense cities. Japan, obviously, it's an island, so it's all packed in, and so they really have to be intentional about their time in nature and making space for nature.
Now, Mark McKnight, Reflection Riding is owned by the state chartered nonprofit organization, right?
That's correct.
Deeded. It obtained that corporation obtained private land from which local families?
It was the Chambliss family and the Humphreys families, and so they ran it as it was farmland before. It was kind of a bad farm, and it was never very productive. And the
creek runs through it, and they gave it. They had always a charitable interest, and their friends and family would go there and walk the way. And now it's owned by a corporation that's a charity. Now, I'm asking about the ownership, Mark, because we have in the environmental movement, especially in the Chattanooga area, a strong interest in preservation by the legal means, and that would be the conservation easement. And we have in Chattanooga, we have, for example, the Land Trust of Tennessee, which tells the people who go to its website how they can protect their land. And what they do is they grant an easement on the land, which is to say a claim upon the land to the trust, which is, of course, also kind of a perpetual organization as a corporation. It outlives the lives of any of its members. And the idea of having preservation made solid is, again, by in the law and in the arrangements of land. So an easement is granted, and though the owner can sell the land, he can give it to a nonprofit. The easement, the controlling claims through that easement go on apparently in perpetuity. And there's a story, for example, how strong support in the Chattanooga recently, how strong the support is for this kind of work. For example, Bob Corker says, it is important that this land is available for future generations, and I appreciate the hard work of all those making that a priority. And that's the story about the Sherwood Forest last year, 4,000 acres that are under this protection. And Desjardins representative says similar thing. He's an outdoorsman, and he's glad it's going to be provided for public recreation and to preserve the land for future generations. And these are public-private partnerships that do something, though I'd like to suggest may be illegal. And that is because the Tennessee Constitution forbids perpetuities. It forbids them under certain circumstances as monopolies. And monopoly and a perpetuity have a problem in that they don't let future generations make their own decisions. They pretend to bind the use of land past the 21 years and 10 months allowed on some uses of perpetuity. In other words, you can't control something past 21 years of the decease of the person who granted it. And 10 months, of course, is not, of course, but 10 months refers to the length of gestation of a baby. So if there's a baby involved, it's 21 years plus the 10 months that a baby is in gestation. That is the maximum allowable control you have into the future to give your hand on the future. And so my question is, since it seems to be questionable legally, is there some alternative? Well, first of all, is there an easement of that kind on reflection riding, or is that held by the corporation?
Well, I'll say first, I'm a huge fan of conservation easements, and we can talk about that later. Second, no, there are no conservation easements on reflection riding's land. What the two families did is they actually created a not-for-profit corporation. I mean, it's a corporation just like any other corporation.
A Tennessee corp.
It's a Tennessee corporation, and they made a gift of a substantial amount of money as well as the land into this corporation. Over time, there actually started a completely different nonprofit called the Chattanooga Nature Center. We are now merged, although we still do have two entities that I'm technically president of two different corporations. We're trying to clean that up by the end of the year because it's just sort of an artifact of how the whole thing happened. But ultimately, no, we control our land. I have discussed the idea of conservation easements, and there are certainly some strong arguments for them. You can also do things like binding resolutions, and there are ways that inside of the corporation that you can make sort of pronouncements about how you want future board members / owners to behave. That arguably could be as influential as a conservation.
That might go beyond the 21-year limit you're suggesting.
Right.
Well, okay. About these easements then that are intended to preserve very beautiful scenes, beautiful pieces of land that have a view or a vista that are remarkable. They're breathtaking. Do you see any kind of problem ahead with the legality or some kind of challenge to the legality of these easements, which are, I think, very popular? They've been around for at least a decade. Mark McKnight.
I don't really see anybody. I don't think there's much appetite to challenge these in court. I think that when you think about protecting land in general, that I have always seen it as I've always had a portfolio approach to protecting land. If you think about how you manage your own financial portfolio, you don't want 100% in one bucket. I look at conservation easements as one type of protection that allows for the ongoing private ownership of land, but that still has an intention towards conservation. I think it's just as limiting as zoning downtown. That's a legal restriction on what you can do with your land, even though you own the land. That's acceptable, and that's a way that we behave. Technically, you could change it legally, and I think that, like I said, I don't think there's any appetite to change what conservation easements are intending to do, but I think it could potentially happen. We've seen this in the public lands debate that's going on right now, but we don't want 100% of our recreation opportunities to be on publicly owned land. I mean, we want a portfolio of different types of landowners. We want state parks, we want county parks, we want city parks, we want private land. We want all those things to be working together to provide an ecosystem in which human beings can actually live and thrive.
We're talking with Mark McKnight. Mark, how can my listener find out more about reflection riding, Arboretum, and Nature Center?
Reflectionriding.org is the best way. It's riding as in riding a bike. reflectionriding.org.
Reflectionriding.org.
Come
And
check
there's
us out.
also a blog
And of
there.
course- Yeah, and of course you can find us on Facebook and all that sort of thing too.
Well, we do thank you for joining us, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
This is David Tulis. We are covering local economy and free market in Chattanooga and beyond, arguing that you should love your neighbor and buy local. And as Mark suggests, you should get out more. And I strongly recommend that you take part in upcoming activities at the Arboretum, Reflection Riding Arboretum. There's an annual plant sale that my listener missed, right? When is that every year?
There's a spring and a fall plant sale, so stay tuned. The next one will be April.
We do thank you for giving us a couple minutes of your time. Brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. That's Nooganomics.com. And this is David Tulis. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio.